Hi, welcome to a special recording of Vantage Point. I'm very, very honored because today I get to speak about a topic that many of us maybe have been underestimating in importance, which is about the diaspora or diaspora in that sense have been related now to trans citizenship, transnationalism, but I guess the big group would be the migrant workers as defined by ILO. But lately, more and more since the turn of the century, a lot more focus by a lot of institutions into the importance of the diaspora. The UN has even linked it to the ability of the citizens living outside the origin country to give back to economic development directly or indirectly. But today, I'm opening that up a bit more because usually in this country, when we mention diaspora, we'll be looking mainly at the Chinese and the Indian diaspora naturally. But closer to home, just across the Straits of Malacca, Indonesia is now making a big move into the thinking of the Indonesian diaspora. So I have Dr. Dino Patijala with me, the ambassador of Indonesia to the United States of America, but also the man, the thought leader who have come up with a more strategic view of the Indonesian diaspora. So I'm going to give Dr. Dino Patijala the first chance to maybe tell us more about the Indonesian diaspora, because I attended your dinner last night where you give a bit of briefing to the KL population about the Indonesian diaspora. But one thing that struck me was this is not about asking for nation state and the nation states present by its citizens outside the country, but more about the 21st century and a new way of connectivity. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Pak Kamaro. And in fact, it's a new discovery that we've had with this Indonesian diaspora. In the sense that we found a new treasure, a new harta karun,
Yeah.
Because it's a large community, very remarkable, full of talents, know-how, skills, and connections. Yet we did not recognize them as a community. For many decades, what we paid attention to was only Indonesian citizens abroad, which numbered around 4.7 million Indonesians. And those with Indonesian heritage, but already foreign nationals, we have forgotten about them. And we found out that together, the Indonesian passport holders and those with Indonesian heritage account to 8 to 10 million Indonesians. Mm-hmm. And if there were a province, they would be one of the richest provinces in yes. Indonesia. So this is what we have started to engage since last year with the Indonesian Congress of Diasporas in Los Angeles. We had about 2,000 Indonesians from all over the world coming from 22 countries, and this year we're going to have the second Congress. But we have found clearly people who are excited about being Indonesian diasporas and people who've never lost their connections to Indonesia.
I'll get back to that because you said that, the connection when the 2,000 over people in Los Angeles or first Congress, they didn't even know each other, but tears started to flow. Connectivity emotionally just happened like that. Yes. People who don't know each other before that. But before I go there, I was also really, really taken by when you mentioned that it's not about loyalty back to the homeland. It's about connectivity. And you understand that some of them, they are already citizens of another nation. But that's not the point. The point is, even via definition by ILO and all the other agencies of the UN, it's not just about a citizen going overseas. It's also about a group of people linked together by the image in their head, by the consciousness in their hearts, back to an anchor base. And that anchor base in this instance, we're talking about Indonesia. So if I apply that to Malaysia and the Malaysian population, even within my family, I can trace back somebody who has some roots either from Sumatra or Java. Yeah. So in that case, maybe this is a new way of looking at diplomacy and economic development and people-to-people relations. We know lately, it could have been better, the relation between our two countries. This concept of serumpun, some people think that has been outdated. But I think if we look at diaspora, this is the center. And this is a new discourse.
I agree completely. It's one of the things that should force us to change the way we conduct diplomacy, right? Not very rigid, not very legalistic, and only talking about those with Indonesian passports, but stressing more on, as you said, connectivity, connections. And, you know, Pak Kamaro, if you ask me what makes the world go around today, it's not money, it's connections, relationships. And these are more important than money, and these are the things that multiply wealth and opportunities and progress for all. I mean, you know, I'm now ambassador in the United States, and I've learned recently that the most powerful diaspora in the world is only 14 million people, the Jewish diaspora, right? But why are the Jewish diaspora so powerful? Because they're so well connected, right? I don't know any Jewish industrialists that I've met in the United States who don't know the next ones.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very small community, but they're extremely well connected, and that is the source of that power. And that's one thing that I think is relevant to us here, that we may be large, we may be scattered, but if we're not connected, then we will be weak and irrelevant.
If that's the benchmark, and you've gone across different cities in America, not just meeting the diaspora, but meeting, you know, people from the Foreign Affairs Committee and whatever else. So where are we? We, as in us in this Nusantara and Rumpun, as compared to the Jewish diaspora? Because maybe that's the benchmark where we can base a lot of values for us to network now. Because others has done it. It's just now that we have this new consciousness. Maybe we have been underestimating it so much before.
Yeah, I think our cultural presence, the Malay heritage around the world is quite wide. And in fact, it would be an interesting area of study because we've never really looked into it. But we know that you know, our ancestors have gone to Madagascar, they're in South Africa and fought against apartheid. They're in Suriname, they're in Holland, you know, they're in many other places. And I'm only talking about the you know, historical ancestral diaspora. What about the modern day ones?
Yes.
You know, there's quite a few of them. You know, there's a study that says there's 3 million people from the developing countries who leave their country and reside abroad. And what we found today in the modern day is that even though when they leave, we don't lose them.
Yeah.
You know, they become a hub for more opportunities for their friends and colleagues back home.
I remember the cherry bomb story. I have to go for the first commercial break, but once we are back, we'll go to that. But before that, we might also want to ask, because the definition is quite free and wide in terms of who the diaspora is for diaspora Indonesia. And maybe even President Barack Obama can be linked there by that definition. That we'll discuss after this short break. Thank you for still watching Vantage Point, and you're very lucky because you're sitting in and listening in to a very, very important person. Dr. Dino Patijala is here, founder of and thought leader for Diaspora Indonesia, the ambassador of Indonesia to America. And the UN in 2006, I think, had a research done, the population division, and they're looking at the diaspora transnational migration. And the number, I think, is around 191 million people, migrant workers all over the world. And migrant workers are just a subset of diaspora discourse that we're having right now. So, Pak Dino will put it around 10 to 20 million for the Indonesian diaspora. So it's a huge number because the definition doesn't have to be rigid. Doesn't have to be a passport holder. So in that case, I would like to throw to you this, and I'm sure the audience at home also would like to know, where would you put President Barack Obama then? Because the consciousness of Indonesia is quite big, a significant part of the consciousness of the mind of President Barack Obama.
Yes, well, from our perspective, the Indonesians, diasporas, we certainly see President Barack Obama as being part of us, because he has Indonesian background. You know, his mother lived in Indonesia. He lived in Indonesia. The family loved Indonesian cultures. They promoted batik, studied microcredit for Indonesian poor, and so on. So we have some ownership of President Barack Obama. And I think President Barack Obama has said in different ways that his experiences in Asia made him the first Pacific president of America, and I think that's very important.
And I think it's no coincidence that American diplomacy has been re-energized for the Asia Pacific during his administration.
Yeah.
Does that carry a bit of help for you to do your job in America?
Absolutely.
Diplomacy?
As ambassador in the United States, one of the hardest things is to get the president of the United States to know where you are on the map and how you are relevant. I was posted in the United States 12 years ago, and I knew that was a tough task. So getting a president who knows Indonesian language and Indonesian food and Indonesian culture is quite an asset for us.
If I look at, because from your dinner last night, you also call for the individuals within the parameters of the diaspora to come forward, to contribute.
Yes.
Ideally, I get your point. You said you can even eradicate poverty in Indonesia. And, even from Malaysia looking in, we would wish we can help lessen that rate of poverty in Indonesia, which is about 10-14%.
Yes.
So if one family, let's say middle class and upwards, of the diaspora overseas, let's being matched to one hardcore poverty family in Indonesia, then maybe the next generation can automatically get out of poverty. However, we know that realistically, there's a lot of challenges for that to happen. Perception-wise, if I go from the communication information that was raised by the audience last night, there's still a lot of gap, because sometimes how the community overseas sees the homeland or the country of origin is very different. Maybe it hasn't been updated since the day they left.
Yes.
And not many people sometimes live because of good things. Sometimes it's a bad thing that make them move. So that perception is coloring their perception now. So how do you work that for the diaspora community in America right now?
Well, fortunately for me, the diaspora community in the United States has been driven by positive energy. There's some cynicism in Indonesia, the growing culture of cynicism for some reasons. I can't explain why. But alhamdulillah, energy positive is very strong among diaspora communities, not just in the US, but we find worldwide. And there's very strong sense of activism and solidarity. They all want to do something for Indonesia, and they know that Indonesia is not a perfect place, but they are very hopeful, and they believe that Indonesia's prospects are quite bright in the future. So now the question is, how do we connect this 10, 20 million Indonesians abroad with the 230 million Indonesians at home? What are the ways that they can be useful? I mean, one of the programs, as you indicated, was one diaspora family can contribute to one poor family back home. And if we have enough numbers, I think we can make a difference and achieve zero poverty. But all this is really, I mean, it's so new to us, this what diaspora can do, and new to the diaspora themselves. So I think we're going to see a lot of exciting new ideas on how they can do better for themselves and for the community back home.
It's so refreshing to see that the origin of the thinking for the diaspora of Indonesia comes from a civil service person. But how would you work that back into policy? Because at the end of the day, if the government doesn't acknowledge this, then this is an advantage that is just being left lying there and not tapped into. So how do you now work it?
Good question, and I'm blessed. Maybe this is how God wanted it, because my previous job was as a foreign policy advisor to the president. So when we were developing this idea and organizing the Congress, the first person I mentioned to was the president, and he immediately got it. And he immediately said, I'm going to send a speech by video to that Congress, and I'm going to send some ministers to the Congress, and we're going to make it a success. He immediately understands it. And now, whenever President Yudhoyono travels abroad, he no longer meets with the masyarakat Indonesia. No, now he meets with diaspora Indonesia. He did it in New York, and he was taken back at how remarkable this group was, full of lawyers and bankers and successful people. And also, he's going to be in Germany a few days from now, and he's going to meet the diaspora as well. So you're very right. Unless it has political support, it's not going to happen. And fortunately, that political support at the top is happening. The question is now how to translate that into bureaucratic machinery.
And it must be sustainable. It cannot be, because sometimes politics is seasonal, and we know that there's a big election 2014. Malaysia is earlier, but Indonesia is going to have presidential election 2014. So how do you work it into the civil service mindset for this not to be related to any leader, but actually as a resource, harta karun untuk bangsa itu? I have to go for the last break, but once we are back, we can talk about that. Maybe we can tease you a bit by asking, sometimes when people look at this as harta karun or treasure, they also see the political foresight and power sometimes can worry a lot of people. Or people can use that power for other ways and other means. And we've seen how, and you've accounted for that, like you said about the Armenian groups of diaspora and rivalries, political insinuations. So how would you now grow this baby of yours from the ideation? Now you have the first Congress, we're going to have the second Congress, but to move forward, it can easily go off rail and or hijack in that sense. That we'll discuss after this short break. Thinking about ethnicity, about nation state, and about people's movement. That's what the episode of Vantage Point today is. But we're looking from a very unique door that we have been underestimating before. That is the diaspora. And we have a case study live here on set right now because I have Dino Patijalal, and he's the thinking founder of Diaspora Indonesia. For the last block, Pak Dino, because it's so easy for something that's so good to be seen only from the power relations aspect. And any politicians or any NGOs or anybody in Indonesia looking at the strength of diaspora Indonesia already now being galvanized. And you're talking about 10 to 20 million. People looking at that will see, wow, if I harness that to whatever end, that's very powerful. So how do you work that? One, we've discussed about making it into the government, acknowledgement and maybe specific political will and policies. But also networks or even specific events, it's so easy to be derailed. And one misstep here, you forever lose some of the diaspora waiting outside because they say, see, this is why I left in the first place, for example. So how do you now grow? Because we do know that adolescent period is the most testing period.
Yeah, I agree. This is why we want to hold the second Congress in Jakarta, and we call it Pulloncampo, coming home. And what we want to do is to really get the nation in Indonesia and the bureaucracy to see up close and personal what diaspora is. It's one thing for them to read about it in Los Angeles, but if we bring them to Jakarta and they engage, they talk, they speak, then it's going to have a different psychological impact. So from that, we hope we will get some new energy for this diaspora movement. But I agree with you, it has to be systematic, it has to be for the long term, and it has to be sustainable.
Maybe I can help the audience if I ask you to indulge us by, I'm sure you're a forward thinker. So imagine 10 to 15 years from now, what would be the ideal state? If we have this conversation in 15 years, what would be the thing for Diaspora Indonesia by that time?
I would imagine there's going to be Indonesia Diaspora Network in every major diaspora countries. We have identified at least 18 countries with diaspora communities, and we imagine Indonesia Diaspora Network in the country and in the local chapters. And we would imagine that they would have a very strong working relationship with our Chamber of Commerce and with our small and medium enterprises. A rich two-way beneficial relationships. I would imagine that would make a dent on poverty, maybe reduce poverty by, I don't know how many percent, maybe 4 or 5%, right? And I would imagine that would become a hub for innovation, connecting Indonesians with less opportunity with the opportunities abroad. So there would be a clear economic, social, and cultural force for progress, right? And I underline the word force because they're actually more than just a collection of individuals. They're actually an entity that can make a big difference and really impact.
So if I'm a political party person back there in Indonesia, I have to tap into that. There will be a political discourse, discussion, movement trying to galvanize this force.
Yes, and in fact, Pak Kamaro, one thing that encouraged me is about the diaspora. Not one single politician in Indonesia has said anything bad about it. In fact, they all say everything good about it, which means that it has potential to be an inspirational force for the country.
I would add the layer of innovation to that, if you could indulge me, because the more I have talk shows, discussions with a lot of people across the world, it's the knowledge economy era, and innovation is the center and fulcrum of that. We've been exporting things, but it's not enough just to export palm oil. If we were to move the income per capita of both our nations, we need to export something more derived from palm oil, for example. So this innovation, sometimes you've got to travel to have an open mindset. Because if just within your four walls and you don't see it, but suddenly in LA I can see it, suddenly in UK I can see it. So I guess maybe this is the first strength that you see in the diaspora that you've been
Absolutely. The most remarkable people that I've met among our Indonesian diaspora community are the innovators. And I find them every day, Pak Kamaro, in Columbus, in Silicon Valley, in New York. And they were lost from our radar screen for some reasons. And there's quite a large communities. And they're always willing to help. They're always willing to say, hey, give us some of your, your students, what market opportunities you have. They're always willing to do something.
Please relate the cherry bomb story to the audience.
Yes. Well, we have. I went to a place called Columbus, Ohio, and we met a group of Indonesian diaspora who created a new startup company called Guest Hub. And when I went to see them, they said they're already Americans, American company, American money. And I thought we lost them. But apparently, I asked them further, how do you get how do you design your programs? They said, well, we source them in Cirebon, which is a city in Jakarta. And we have working relationship with the Institute of Technology of Cirebon. And they send their students to us, and we take care of them, and we have a good working relationship. Which means, even though they have left Indonesia and have assumed American passports, they continue to think Indonesia, and they continue to extend opportunities to Indonesians back home.
So it's not brain drain. A lot of people within Southeast Asia, or maybe other regions in the world, would see it. Malaysia, for instance, have 1 million people working outside the country, but it's not necessarily a loss, right?
No, it's brain hub. They become a hub for others, and we never lose them. So once they're Malaysians or Indonesians, once they have that in their hearts, no matter how far they go, they never really leave home. So that's the beautiful thing about the diaspora.
We talk about the Jewish diaspora, and they have such a strong state. Controversial it might be, but it's a strong state. And Indonesia is rising. And BRIC now is BRIIC in that sense. And I just had the opportunity to sit down with Prof. Nuri Rubini, the global economic expert. And he mentioned from Indonesia to Malaysia to Philippines is the underestimated growth countries that to him is more sustainable than some others people looking at. So if we continue to rise, this region continues to rise, wouldn't it also make better sense for the diaspora of Indonesia and diaspora of Malaysia to get together? Because if we put those numbers together, the Malay language, for example, suddenly is within the maybe top 6 or top 5 of the most talked about language in the world.
I agree. I mean, Indonesian and Malaysian communities abroad already get along extremely well. We think of ourselves as family members, right? So I think that's a space that can be created very creatively out of that. So,
But I have to extend another invitation. Anytime you come to Malaysia,
you.
again, you will always be welcome to be on this show. Before I part and to the audience, would you be involved in the elections of 2014 coming forward? Because, your name, if we Google it, it's very strong up and coming name in the Indonesian story.
Well, for now, I'm happy being ambassador. I mean, I do have plans to go into politics at some point, but when that point is, I will have to negotiate with my wife.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Dino,
Okay.
Pak Tijang, for
Thank
making
you,
time.
Pak Kamal.
Thanks to you for watching Vantage Point, and we'll see you in another episode of Vantage Point very, very soon. Goodbye.